It's time to go into business for yourself. Get ready for another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. Education, insight, and inspiration. Here's your host, small business and franchise expert, Tom Scarda.
Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy. My name is Tom Scarda, and I am excited about having a really different kind of guest with me today. I have with me Frank King, who actually is a mental health public speaker. So I'm going to let him explain it. But Frank, I wanted to bring Frank on because this is a crazy time. It's, as we record this, it's April 15th, and it is middle of pandemic 2020. And there's a lot of business owners out there that are feeling pretty down about business, rightfully so. And so I want to bring in Frank because Frank is the mental health comedian and suicide prevention speaker. He works with teams to develop effective social isolation strategies for their teams. He participates, his participants learn how to recognize warning signs associated with isolation and understand how to start a conversation on reducing physical distancing while staying connected. By participating in this course or listening to this podcast, you'll have the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of your team members and also for yourself. Frank used to write for The Tonight Show, and he's a full-time speaker and a comedian, has a great sense of humor, and so I want to bring in Mr. Frank King. How are you, Frank?
I'm good. I'm looking for my document. Hold on social distancing and staying sane. It's got to be here somewhere.
Yeah, I think that, that what you speak about, although you have not been speaking about pandemic issues, now you are. And there's a lot of franchise companies out there that listen into this show that might want to share this kind of information with their franchisees who are going through somewhat of a panic situation. And so this is really, really an important thing.
Yes. And I actually have another podcast this afternoon at 2 with a friend. And I pimped it on LinkedIn. I said, what was it? So you're stuck at home. You're stressed. Having trouble sleeping, getting out of bed in the morning, even just to wash your hair. You're unsure where the world is going to go from here. Lots of uncertainty, because I get a lot of phone calls like that from neuronormal people, neurotypical people. Right. And they say to me, Frank, can't eat, can't sleep, insomnia, can't get out of bed in the morning, wash my hair. I just can't seem to get moving. I'm depressed. Is there a mental health name for that? And I said, yes, there is. It's called Wednesday. Because I've been living with that for decades. Welcome to my world, man. Yeah, it is an uncertain time. I think the uncertainty actually is probably at the heart of most people's issues because, with 9/11, it all happened on one day, and then we began to rebuild. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end. With this thing, the president saying maybe before the 1st of May, the governor of Oregon here said certainly not before the 15th of May. So, and that's all based on metrics. How many people have got it? How many people think they're going to get it? How many people, So,
right.
The uncertainty, which breeds a number of mental health issues, stress, anxiety, anger, if you caught it from somebody, or anger if you're at the grocery store and somebody's not wearing a mask, and you're like, dude, the mask is really for me, not for you, in case you happen to be asymptomatic and infected.
Right.
Boredom, like isolation. Your listeners may be wondering at this moment, wait a minute, this is all good information, Frank, but you're a comedian. Yeah. What are you doing talking about suicide?
That's what I was going to ask you. How did this all happen?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things. I think the comedian is a good one to talk about depression, thoughts, and suicide, because the comedian's job is and always has been since the time of the court jester to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless. And I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip. I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there's life, and nobody dies laughing. And it runs in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. I'll spare you the details. It's in my first TED Talk. If you type in Frank King TED Talk, it's called A Matter of Laugh, Laugh, or Death. It's my first. It's the story is there, but I don't want to trigger anybody on your podcast by telling them the gruesome details.
Yeah.
And I myself, in 2010, height of recession, speaking business dropped off 80%. My wife and I lost everything we'd put together in 25 years of marriage and filed Chapter 7. And that's the point at which I learned what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger. A friend of mine was in the audience not long ago. He'd never heard me say that out loud. So he came up after my keynote. He goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?" Again, the reason I didn't pull the trigger is in that first TED Talk. I've done 5 of them. The last one, by the way, not yet. 5 TEDx Talks.
Wow.
All on mental health. The last one is my favorite. It's the only one I ever got a standing ovation for. It's the most kind of out there. It's called Mental Health and the Orgasm, Treat Your Depression Single-Handedly. It took me 15 tries, 15 different committees to finally get somebody to let me do that. And I mean, we had a ball. And I got a standing ovation at the end. It was just, it'll be up on YouTube probably sometime in the next month. But and that's how I rebranded, by the way, from a funny speaker to a speaker who's funny, because everybody knew me as a comedian. So I needed to do something serious. So in 2014, I got my first TED Talk, and I came out on stage. Nobody knew I was depressed and suicidal. Not my family, not my wife, not my friends, until that moment when I came out on stage and spoke. And that made the difference in rebranding.
Yeah.
It took a while and several more TEDx talks to get to the point where I became the mental health comedian. And I believe what my third TED Talk is called Mental with Benefits, the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness. And that I believe my mental illness is simply the flip side of my comic timing, writing skills, stage presence, whatever those comic superpowers. It's just the other side of that coin. Because everybody I've ever met who has a mental illness who's not completely dysfunctional has some kind of superpower, creative, artistic, musical, great writer, comedians, a lot of comedians with the issue.
Yeah,
so
absolutely true.
You and I were talking about my fourth TEDx talk, which was inspired by, I'm guessing, people who listen to this podcast. It was inspired by entrepreneurs. Because think about it, as a comedian, and I've been doing comedy since the day after Christmas, 1985. I was on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop. My lovely wife and I, she just came along for the ride. 7 years in chains. Opened up for Foxworthy and Ron White and Ellen DeGeneres and Rosie and Seinfeld, Dennis Miller, and on and on, back when they were just comics. But I was reading an article about depression and thoughts of suicide among entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And actually looked at 3 different studies. And they all came up basically the same numbers. That 1/3 of entrepreneurs are depressed and having thoughts of suicide. Now, the clinicians believed it was long hours, not much sleep, and unmet expectations, or something like this, where you built this, and then the government comes in and goes, for the good of everybody, you're going to shut it down for at least 90 days.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of dentists. I do a lot of dental conventions, and the dentists, they told them, look, 90 days. You cannot, unless it's an emergency. And I can't imagine having to shut down for a business with payroll and expenses and leases and whatever for 90 days. Anyway, I got to thinking about the entrepreneurs who are depressed and suicidal, because the name of the talk is Suicide, the Secret to My Success, Dead Man Talking. Because I was married to my first wife, a lovely woman, who had different goals for me. I was selling insurance, and that's exactly what she wanted me to do. I was not going to open mic night, which is what I knew I should be doing. And I got depressed and suicidal. And I thought, if I don't change something, I'm going to kill myself. And my second thought was, well, what have I got to lose? I can divorce my wife, quit my insurance job, and try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can still kill myself. And I have met a number of entertainers and entrepreneurs who had the very same thought process. So my supposition for the talk was, what if those 1/3 of entrepreneurs, some are truly depressed because of long hours, little sleep, and unmet expectations, but could there be a subset of those who are not depressed and suicidal because they're entrepreneurs? Is it possible they are actually entrepreneurs because they were depressed and suicidal in their previous life and realized, hey, I got to get out of here. I got to do something different. So the The danger there, of course, is if you are, say, depressed and having thoughts of suicide on a regular basis and things are going well, then again, if there's a pandemic, although I got to tell you, most of the people I know who have an organic, depression, it's wiring and chemistry like I have. It's not situational. I've been most depressed at some of the best times in my life. That said, it can be triggered by a situation like you're closing.
Right.
Oh, God. So in addition to anxiety and frustration and resentment and uncertainty and anger and loneliness and boredom, you have this this layer of depression you brought into the equation with you. Although a lot of people who are depressed deal with those sorts of emotions on a daily basis.
Yep.
So when I do this talk, I say, look, here's the deal. You need to take some advice. If you're neuronormal or neurotypical and you're really struggling in this situation, take some advice from somebody who has mental illness. You need a safe care plan. You need routine. They interviewed an astronaut. The guy was in the space station for a year, essentially by himself. How do you handle that? And he gave the advice that I give to people with mental illness. Okay, look, I know you don't have to set the alarm because you're not going to work, but you need to set the alarm same time every day. Get up, get to the bathroom, shower, shave, and put on, business casual at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to schedule your work and your breakfast, lunch, and dinner schedule, like you would at work, and then schedule your breaks. My self-care plan involves good night's sleep, exercise, and I got some exercise equipment here. I got an old Nordic track. I mean, it is like, it's coal-fired. That's how old it is. But I got some perfect push-ups and I got some stretchy bands. So you need to plan your exercise time. So good night's sleep, exercise, diet. I'm on a strict keto diet, and I do 18-6 intermittent fasting. I fast for 18 hours, eat for 6. So your schedule, routine, and then limit your media consumption. Don't have the news 24-hour news channel run 24 hours because the news is. There's a glimmer here and there, but the news is basically bad. Yep. And it's going to be a while before it gets good again.
Yep.
And so I would say an hour a day, maybe just to catch up on the headlines. And I would go to a source, a reliable source. And so far I found the most reliable sources are the governors and mayors, people who are on the ground in the place where you live, who know the situation around you, not nationally. But they know in Oregon, the governor came out yesterday, along with Gavin Newsom in California and Inslee in Washington, and said, here's the deal. Here's the 6 things that have got to happen before we open up again. So we all now know what the metrics are for reopening. I mean, people wanted her to say we're going to reopen on whatever day, but they're not at that point yet. But here's the 6 things have to happen before we reopen. So I found the governors and the mayors seem to be, because they're right there on the ground.
That's a good point.
And the governors of New York, Connecticut, New Jersey are also forming a coalition because they're so tightly interconnected.
Right.
They figure they'll do all this together. Because I remember the beginning of this, the mayor of New York.
Cuomo.
Say again?
Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, Cuomo. He goes, listen, it doesn't do any good to close the bars in New York. You know why? Because people drive across the bridge.
Right.
It's just because they're like this. They're right there by you. So they're going to coordinate their, when they reopen, as it were. So diet, exercise, good night's sleep. And I do meditation twice a day. I have a thing called a cat napper. It's a 29-minute, takes you down, relaxes you, brings you back up the other end, lowers cortisol, raises endorphins, lowers your blood pressure. Just a way to reset. And
is that an app, Frank?
It's actually an MP3. If you type in the cat napper, MP3, you'll find the download. It's like $13. And it's got a binaural beat underneath to sync the hemispheres of your brain. And I mean, the guy starts talking, and then as he's bringing me back up, I can feel my breathing pick up. And I usually wake up right at the 3, 2, 1, awake and fresh. And I've been doing that for years, twice a day. And I plan it after breakfast, after lunch. That's when I do it. So again, if you see a pattern here for dealing with uncertainty, anxiety, stress, depression, that having a routine. And depressed people often do something called gamification. And I stumbled upon it accidentally. I didn't know it had a name. For example, my gym is 25 minutes away. That's the longest mile is not from my house to the gym. It's from my bed to the front door.
Right.
So I made a deal with myself, and it's called gamification, that if I could get to the gym, all I had to do was one rep of one exercise, I could turn around and come home. Well, when I get to the gym, I usually do quite a bit more. I usually end up there about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. But the trick is getting there. But the game is that if I get there, I can do one rep of one exercise, turn around and go back home. I must tell you, the other night, the last gig I did was in Chicago. I was exhausted, but I have my gym clothes on. I go down to the gym at the Hilton, nice gym, looking at that elliptical runner, thinking, do I really want to crank up my metabolism before So I got on the elliptical runner. I did a minute and a half. And I got off, went back, and went to bed. Next morning I did an hour, but that's the game.
Right.
And if I have trouble getting out of bed, I make a list of 6 to 8 things, a to-do list. And the game is, as soon as I scratch off number 8, I can go back to bed. I don't care if it's broad daylight outside. I can go back to bed and binge watch the new season of Ozark on Netflix if I want it. The idea is that the antidote oftentimes to those, the stress, the anxiety, the depression, and antidote can be action, moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other.
Yep.
Just make that your goal. You just want to put one foot in front of the other until all 8 things are done, and you go right back to bed. That's called gamification. Also, I think you need to advocate for yourself. I've had 2 aortic valve replacements, a double bypass, a heart attack, 3 stents. It's all familial. It's all stuff I inherited from my family. My dad had a bad valve, so I got it. My mother had the cholesterol of a deep fat fryer. I got it. So I'm an active consumer of healthcare, and I've got a keynote on patient engagement, which is basically patient customer service in the medical field. It's called Nothing About Me Without Me. We're not making a decision unless I weigh in and my team, if it happens to be my family. And so I advocate for myself. And I recommend it at this point in time, for example, with the heart issues. I thought, well, maybe I should be doing something more than the average person, because they keep saying if you have underlying conditions like a heart disease. So my physician has a portal at the hospital, the hospital website, the patient portal. So I went in and you can email them. So I picked my cardiologist and I dropped him an email. Hey, man, what am I supposed to be doing besides the ordinary? And they sent back an email within 24 hours rather than trying to call somebody. But I'm advocating for myself. I want to know. And some of my medications have run out during this time. And so I had to actively contact the prescriber and also the company that handles the meds in our insurance plan. And Walgreens, bless their heart, they've got a new thing where for free, you call in a prescription and a credit card number, and they'll deliver them to your house within 2 days, no more. But you have to ask. You have to actively, proactively take care of yourself in that way. So make sure you stay in touch with your medical providers, your primary care physician, your cardiologist, or whatever. And part of the stress and anxiety is financial, obviously. I just saw today there are 2 Congress people who put a bill into the hopper to pay everybody $2,000 a month, basic income, whatever, until this is over. Because they said, $1,200 per adult, $500 per kid, not going to go that far. So I don't know if the $2,000 will go anywhere, but bless their hearts for giving it a shot.
Right.
Financial problems, again, people tend to hide their heads. I heard a guy interviewed who said, look, I didn't know how much money I had in my checking account. I just wrote checks because I didn't want to know. I just kept writing checks. Figuring, when it's gone, it's gone. My sister used to do that. I go, Jane, you don't have that much money in the bank to pay all these bills. She goes, you know what? I think of it as kind of a Hunger Games, first come, first serve. Whoever gets to the bank first gets them. So I just read today online that they're part of the stimulus package is you can ask your mortgage company, mortgage servicing company, or whatever bank, probably not your bank, probably a mortgage service company, how they do that. They sell the loans. for 6 months forbearance. And then at the end of 6 months, if things have not changed, if you're still unemployed, ask for another 6. At which point, I have a friend who works in mortgage servicing. He said, at that point, Frank, what they'll do is they'll say, look, we want to roll the money you owe it back into the loan. We will recalculate, modify it, and amortize it. Now, the danger there is I've got a mortgage at 3.125, which is extremely low. So I'm gonna make all those payments. I don't know that the interest rates will be that low at the end of the year.
Right.
But if you have to have it, you need to call your mortgage company now before you fall behind and ask, I'd like loss mitigation package, what they call it. Same thing with your utilities. Call the power company, call the water company, call the trash company, call the cable and phone, and tell them, look, hey, I've got issues. The nice thing about doing that, by the way, I called my mortgage company just to see what they're offering. By the way, my wife and I, we got the check in the bank this morning from the IRS for $1,200 each.
Oh, nice.
Immediately paid 3 house payments. Bang, bang, bang. So we're good till September 1st on house payments. So, as long as you got a roof, you can finesse the rest, as my mother used to say. So, but yeah, I called the utilities, and I called the mortgage company, and I said to the woman, listen, what do you guys got going for people who are having trouble making their payments? She goes, Frank, you're having trouble making a payment on the mortgage? How could that be? Of course, she's being sarcastic. That's the nice thing about everybody being in this together.
Right.
When you call the power company, they're not surprised. They've got a plan or several plans. Well, can you do this? Can you pay partially? Can you, and by the way, Catholic Family Services, when we filed bankruptcy, they paid our power bill for 3 months. They've got money set aside a certain amount. But you need to ask. You need to go down to Catholic Family Services. They got a food bank.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't too proud to go down there and look, can you help us out with the power bill? And how about the food bank? Apply for food stamps. If you have assets, savings and checking, you're probably not going to get it. But if you're up against the wall and you don't have a lot of money in checking or savings, swallow your pride and go down and apply for food stamps. And then my church every other Saturday has a food bank. Yeah. And if I was at that point, I would go down and I would, stock up on, whatever we needed to survive. So again, the point is you have to advocate for yourself. Call these creditors because they've all, you won't be the first one to call. I'm sure they've got plans in place.
Right. Unfortunately. So what you're saying is, in a way, take responsibility for yourself but you need to ask for what you need. Nobody's going to give you anything unless you ask for it.
Yeah. And let's say you're a business and you got a lease and you got no income coming in. There is obviously with mortgage, a personal mortgage, there's a 6 months and then 6 months. But what if it's rent on a commercial building? Well, there is some relief for the owner of the building if they have to make mortgage payments using your money in rent. So you need to go to your landlord and go, look, I'm not going to be able to pay rent. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm going to be here when this is all over. Can you get a break from your lender? Is there a program you can get into where they can, like the PPP, like the payroll protection plan, where the loan is forgiven at the end? By the way, that's another thing, the PPP, the payroll protection plan. You enroll in that, you keep your employees on, and then they forgive the loan at the end of the time period. Right. And a lot of people don't know, if you're a solo entrepreneur and you don't have W-2 income, you own the business or you're a 1099 employee, the PPE counts income as a solo entrepreneur as payroll. So you add that to your expenses and you apply for a PPP loan on the we'll forgive it side. And I called my bank because I saw the paperwork. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get through this by myself. Call my bank. They got me on the waiting list. As soon as the next batch of money comes down the pipe, she's going to call me back. She's going to walk me through what goes in each blank and what piece of paper I need to send her to apply for my income and my expenses for a couple of months.
That's awesome.
Again, you have to reach out as an entrepreneur to your bank. You need a bank where you have accounts and you have a business relationship, and because that's who you have to go to as a bank you already do business with, apparently. So
that's cool, man. That's some great info. And so how can people get in touch with you? Do you have a website or something like that?
No, I'm in WITSEC. I'm actually, yeah. That's why we're doing this on Zoom. I can't disclose my location. Yes, the website is thementalhealthcomedian.com. Thementalhealthcomedian.com. And here's my last piece of advice, Tom. And again, this is something that people with mental illness often do. People with mental illness often spend too much time in their own hands. So if you do something for someone else, got an elderly neighbor who can't get to the grocery store, have them put the list on the front porch with the dollars. You go to the store, you pick up, you put it back, just if you reach out and do something for somebody, it gets you out of your head, and it is very therapeutic. Reaching out, and because I got to tell you, a number of my mentally ill friends, they couldn't help themselves out of the rain. Right. They just stand there and get stuff. But if you ask them to help somebody else, oh yeah, I'm all up. They're great at helping other people, so it's a great way to get out of your head. And I often say you can't change the world, but you can brighten your little corner of it. And I'm sure there are people around you who have needs, whether it's walking the dog or picking up groceries or going to the pharmacy, or just a phone call to a friend. An old friend that you haven't talked to in a long time, an elderly person who's shut in and is all by themselves. And got used to seeing people come and go, and just you can't do that anymore for the time being.
Yep. That's great advice. I love it. So mentalhealthcomedian.com.
Correct.
Frank King. And I'm going to have all that information on the franchiseacademy.com. So check that out. The links to Frank's talks, the TED Talks, the website, everything will be there for you. So feel free as you are home and still socially separating to enjoy some of Frank's material. So good stuff.
And I think you physically separate, but don't socially separate. There's Skype, there's Facebook Live, there's FaceTime, there's Zoom, there's
so much good stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, if this was 30 years ago, we would have a hard time. There was no.
One last thing, Tom. My phone number, and you're welcome to put it in the show notes.
Sure.
Is 858-405-5653. 858-405-5653. And I put it up on the screen when I do my keynotes, and I tell people, look, here's the deal. If you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person. Because we're not going to judge. We're just going to listen and co-sign whatever BS you're going through.
Yep.
And here's the reason. I got this from Brene Brown. I am so comfortable in my dark, I can sit with you in yours.
Well said. Well said. Love Brene. Props to Brene, too. So that's great. Frank, I really appreciate your time, man. This was just unbelievable. It's priceless information. So happy that you were able to cut out the time to do this.
Hey, man, as I mentioned, comedians are entrepreneurs, and people look at us entrepreneurs and they think, what a great life. They have no idea in good time how difficult it can be.
Yep. Amen to that. Well, thanks, Frank. God bless you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Tom.
All righty. Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. For more info, go to our website, thefranchiseacademypodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Tom Scarda's YouTube channel for educational videos on franchising, education, insight, and inspiration.